Shocking revelations involving U.S. defense spending. According to an audit by the Inspector General of the Pentagon, the U.S. Defense Department did not keep adequate track of its funds going to Chinese research labs. In other words, the Pentagon does not know if it's funding potentially catastrophic biological research in China, like research on coronaviruses at the Wuhan Virology Institute. To learn more about how concerning this is and what can be done to boost transparency, Kevin Hogan with NTD's Good Morning spoke with Steve Yates. He's a former White House Deputy National Security Advisor and the chair of the China Policy Initiative at the America First Policy Institute.
Well, it's kind of a stunning admission. It's one of those things where maybe it's a sure sign you have too much money if you can't tell where all of it is going. But you'd think if you were going to put priority, you would maximum put priority on making sure that it's not going to harmful research that can hurt other people, and also not go to adversaries that have proven willing to hurt the United States. That's extremely disappointing finding, and certainly much more oversight and accountability is required.
Congress has been trying to prevent funding for gain-of-function research to going to adversaries like China, and this Inspector General report just underscores that. So what needs to be done to bring more transparency to the Defense Department to ensure that the U.S. is not funding any harmful research in China?
Well, first and foremost, I think there's a process issue in Congress where a lot of these appropriations and bills are just so big and voluminous that normal human beings don't read through all of them. And so we're going to have to find ways to make sure that because they're spending too much money on too many things, they're not accidentally programming things that are obvious problems. The other is that there should be a deliberate policy in place. Given what happened with COVID-19, there should be no funding for research in China unless there is an affirmative certification that it won't go to these harmful purposes. That will be problematic due to lack of transparency in China. So for the time being, no money for research in China.
Well, Stephen, on that note, here's what the senior vice president of the White Coat Waste Project said. The DoD is shipping U.S. tax dollars to places like China. It's being involved in these institutions that are connected to the CCP and the PLA, and then there's no oversight for the money when it gets there. Is there any solution to that?
Yeah, there really isn't a solution when you're dealing with a very non-transparent country, and other than to say we're not going to send money from, say, our defense budget, which should be sensitive, to anyone unless we can give an affirmative whitelist to who it's going to and how it's being used. And if we don't have that kind of transparency and accountability, then no funding. It should be fairly simple. And there are alternatives. We can do this research with friendlier allies and others who abide by normal protocols for transparency and accountability. It doesn't need to go to China.
So why would any defense spending go to China in the first place?
My assumption is because it was cost effective, I put in air quotes, and perhaps they thought that Chinese researchers were willing to push the horizons on research that others might find too risky or was more regulated in their government and economic system. And so in some ways, the lack of ethics and accountability in China might have been seen as attractive to those who were pushing the horizons and maybe sensibilities of what we should be doing in this area of research.
Well, thank you for bringing awareness to this topic. Steve Yates, former White House Deputy National Security Advisor.
My pleasure. Thank you.